Imagine, if you will, a nation so desperate for change that they willingly embrace a dictator. How could this happen? Picture Germany in the early 20th century, caught in a whirlwind of economic turmoil and societal unrest. The people, yearning for stability, rally behind a charismatic yet devastating figure, Adolf Hitler. But why? Why would they support a leader whose policies would lead to such destruction and despair? Together, we will dive into this perplexing chapter of history. To understand Hitler's ascension, we must first look at the Weimar Republic's downfall. Now, the Weimar Republic, born out of the ashes of World War I, was a fragile entity. This democratic government, a first for Germany, was faced with numerous hurdles. Inflation soared as the government printed money to pay off war reparations, leading to the infamous hyperinflation of the early 20s. The middle class, the backbone of any strong economy, was wiped out. People were desperate and disillusioned, their faith in democracy waning. Politically, the Republic was a hotbed of turmoil. The government was a revolving door of coalitions, none strong enough to survive. Extremism, both from the left and right, was on the rise. The Republic was seen as the November criminals, those who had signed the humiliating Treaty of Versailles. In this atmosphere of economic and political instability, a perfect storm was brewing. As the Weimar Republic crumbled, a new force emerged on the political horizon. This force was none other than Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party. Hitler, a charismatic orator with a knack for capturing the attention of the masses, began his political career in the tumultuous times following World War I. The Treaty of Versailles had left Germany in ruins, and the people were desperate for a leader who could restore their sense of national pride and prosperity. Enter Adolf Hitler, a man who seemed to embody the very spirit of German resilience. His speeches were a mix of fiery rhetoric and sweeping promises. He vowed to rebuild Germany, to tear up the humiliating Treaty of Versailles, and to restore the nation to its rightful place as a leading power in Europe. Hitler's words were fueled by a potent mix of nationalism and anti-Semitism, and though his ideas were extreme, they resonated with a population that felt beaten down and betrayed. Hitler's rise to power wasn't immediate, though. He spent years building up his political base, taking advantage of the economic hardships and political instability of the Weimar Republic. He positioned himself as the antidote to the nation's woes, a strong leader who could guide Germany back to greatness. His political maneuverings and his knack for public speaking eventually led to his appointment as Chancellor in 1933. But Hitler wasn't content with being Chancellor. He wanted absolute power, and he would stop at nothing to get it. So he set about dismantling the democratic institutions of the Weimar Republic, consolidating power in his hands. By the end of the year, Hitler had effectively become a dictator, wielding unprecedented control over the German state and its people. With these promises, Hitler successfully seized power in 1933. His rise was a testament to the power of charisma, of promises made to a desperate populace, and of a nation's desire to reclaim its lost prestige. But as we'll see, Hitler's reign would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Germany, but for the entire world. But what about the German people? Did they resist or embrace this radical change? In the initial stages of Hitler's rule, the public reaction was a complex mix of emotions. Many Germans, still smarting from the harsh economic realities of the Weimar Republic, viewed Hitler's rise as a beacon of hope. They were drawn to his promises of economic rejuvenation, and his charismatic speeches stirred a sense of nationalistic pride that had been dormant for years. The man on the street was suddenly filled with hope. Jobs were being created, the economy was being stabilized, and there was food on the table. On the surface, it seemed as if Hitler was delivering on his promises. However, as the gears of Hitler's regime began to churn, whispers of fear and regret began to permeate the air. Stories of people disappearing, of brutal crackdowns on dissent began to circulate. The reality of Hitler's regime started to sink in. The public's initial support began to waver, replaced by a growing sense of dread. There were those who resisted, who tried to raise their voices against the tide of oppression. they were met with swift and brutal retaliation. It was a time of great fear, a time when silence was the safest stance. While some cheered, others trembled as they watched their nation transform. The consequences of Hitler's reign were catastrophic. A statement that reverberates through history, echoing the horrors of a time that reshaped the world. The aftermath of Hitler's rule is a chilling testament to the depths of human destructiveness. The most immediate and harrowing consequence was World War II. This global conflict, ignited by Hitler's aggressive expansionist policies, resulted in the death of an estimated 70 million people, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. Then there was the Holocaust, a genocide of such scale and brutality that it stands alone in human history. Hitler's virulent anti-Semitism culminated in the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, an atrocity that left a permanent scar on humanity's conscience. And the effects of Hitler's rule extended far beyond the immediate horror of war and genocide. Germany itself was left in ruins, its cities reduced to rubble, its economy decimated. The German people, who had once hailed Hitler as their savior, were now confronted with the horrifying reality of what his rule had wrought. The nation was divided, occupied by the victorious Allies, and the process of denazification began, aimed at eradicating Hitler's influence from German society. But the aftermath of Hitler's reign wasn't confined to Germany. It reverberated across the globe, shaping the post-war world order and leaving a lasting impact on international relations. The creation of the United Nations, the onset of the Cold War, the decolonization of Africa and Asia, all were, in some way, responses to the havoc wreaked by Hitler's regime. In the end, the legacy of Hitler's rule is one of devastation and loss. The human cost was incalculable, the cultural and physical destruction immense. Despite his promises of glory and prosperity, Hitler led Germany and the world down a path of unprecedented destruction. In the end, Hitler's rule brought not glory, but destruction. A stark reminder of the perils of unchecked power and the devastating consequences of hate.